What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Now, there's been a lot of talk online around how Sony is handling this cross-gen period between the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5, with a lot of their big upcoming first-party titles still being on the PlayStation 4. However, it looks like we could actually see a PlayStation 5 exclusive game from Sony maybe get ported backwards to the PS4, and we're going to talk about that one here today. Also, we're going to be talking about a big update heading to the Switch that should open up all kinds of application possibilities for the system, and we're also going to be talking about that Xbox Games Showcase Extended, as we had a bunch of deep dives, as well as some pretty cool announcements. Guys, if you enjoyed these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with the PlayStation 5, the Series X, and GameStop, because getting these systems at any of these retailers right now is still very difficult, especially the PlayStation 5. Well, it looks like GameStop, they've been trying a bunch of different things, right? They make these bundles that are like $800 or $900, and if you're a reseller trying to get just the system, you're probably going to steer clear of that because you're going to end up with a bunch of accessories and games that you won't necessarily be able to flip for twice the amount. But now it looks like GameStop's going a little further and opening up early access to some of these sales pages to their pro members. You can actually see this email that was spotted by Wario64, where it does mention that pro members get exclusive early online access to consoles. And yes, it's a way for GameStop to kind of take advantage of the situation and bolster their pro memberships, but that way they can also guarantee, one per customer. And well, if you're a pro member already, you at least have the ability to kind of hang out and wait for maybe an email that says, okay, the PS5 is going up now and you get in early. It's just tough right now because if they just throw it up on their website, everyone's going to hit it all at once. Bots will be able to start picking these things up, and this is just a way, I guess, to ensure that people who, have memberships with GameStop will get first dibs on it because they figure you're probably going to buy games from us too. Also, here's an interesting story. This was with Axios talking about MLB The Show 21 when it released on the Xbox and, of course, the PlayStation, but this was the first time it had been on the Xbox. Before that, it was just a PlayStation game. But if you think about it, Microsoft would have had to have sent Sony development kits for the Xbox Series platform even before the system was released. In fact, I bet you for the Series S, it wasn't even revealed at the time, and Sarah Bond had actually talked to Axios, even going as far as to say this, quote, it was a real sign of industry trust, because, they're sending Sony, a Sony developer, these development kits for the Series system that wasn't out, or even, in some cases, revealed yet. So yeah, you're sending it technically to your market rival with Sony, and who knows what they could do from there. Obviously, there is paperwork that's still involved with NDAs and all these different things, but it seems like Sony honored all of that. They didn't leak anything out, at least, and I'm sure they took some notes as to what the Series X and Series S were capable of with development, but still, hey, Sony followed the rules here with the NDAs, and I guess nothing really came of Microsoft sending Sony Xbox Series development kits months and months before the system even came out. Oh, and we did get that Pokemon Unite update where we have release windows now for both Switch and cell phones. In fact, it's actually coming to the Switch before it goes to, I guess, Android and iOS devices. We had a full trailer just kind of showing off some of the gameplay, explaining some of the elements, which includes cross-play and cross-progression across these different platforms. It's heading to the Switch July 2021. Again, we don't have like an exact release date yet, just that month. So I assume like a week or two before they'll say, hey, it's coming out, this day in July. Remember, it is a free to start game, as they say, and then I'm sure there's plenty of stuff you can buy, obviously, as you go through. And then it will be heading to mobile devices in September, again with crossplay and cross progression. So I guess keep an eye out for any kind of solid release date for both platforms as we go forward here in the coming weeks. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this PlayStation 5 game that could actually get ported backwards to the PlayStation 4. This would not be the first time we have seen this, because Godfall just announced at E3 that it was going to be releasing a PlayStation 4 version of the game. Yeah, it was like a timed PS5 exclusive, keeping it away from the PlayStation 4, which obviously was a way for them to at least work to push the PS5 out of the gate with some sort of exclusive. Even if it wasn't like a great game or anything, it was still something that you could only play on the PS5. I will say the developers maybe talked it up a bit too much, because I think at one point they said this is only possible on the PS5. Well, apparently not. Anyway, we can see this tweet here that was put up by PlayStation Game Size, where they say, Demon's Souls news. Yes, Demon's Souls have a PS4 version in database, but this version can be canceled, can be released soon, or can be only small test version for developers. Now, they've gone on a bit further to clarify that this is different than like the digital art book of the game that could actually be viewed on the PlayStation 4. It had its own like database number that was separate from this one. And there's a few things that could happen here. One, Demon's Souls was in development obviously for a while since it came out like day one for the PS5. It was in development for years and years before that. And there is a good chance that they maybe played around with it on the PS4 and even thought, hey, maybe this could be a PlayStation 4 title. I'm sure Demon's Souls, yeah, they could probably get that to work on the PS4. I mean, if I look at Ratchet & Clank, which I'm almost done with the Platinum Trophy and all this, so I spent quite a bit of time in this game, relatively speaking. You know, like Ratchet & Clank's not a super long game, but I understand looking at it that, yeah, this game probably wouldn't work on the PlayStation 4 because of the different things they're doing with the load times and changing between dimensions, especially in a certain world where you're like jumping back and forth between two different versions of it on the fly at times very, very rapidly. But Demon's Souls, I mean, yeah, we had quick load times. The game looks very pretty and sharp, but they could probably tone some things down, the loading times to be extended, and yeah, I feel like a game that's technically a remake of a PS3 game would probably work on the PS4. And normally I'd say, hey, you know what, this is probably a test version where they were playing around with it on the PS4 a while ago and it's just kind of still in the database. But after what happened here with Gran Turismo 7, where it sounds like kind of as they were developing it just for the PS5, Sony kind of changed their mind and said, hey, you know what? There's still a large user base on that PS4. Maybe we should make Gran Turismo 7 also work on the PlayStation 4 and we could sell more copies that way. I mean, Demon's Souls, sure, I'm sure that would sell quite a few copies on the PS4 if they wanted to do a port backwards from the PS5 to the PS4. Again, just kind of make it work on the hard drive, lower the resolution, textures, frame rate. I'm sure all that is in play. But how would that make early adopters of the PlayStation 5 feel necessarily who like were thinking, okay, I gotta get this PS5 if I want to play Demon's Souls? Technically, that still holds up. But after kind of the backlash Sony got with their cross-gen talk that kind of shifted as we started to go towards, we have God of War coming up and a few others, and like, oh yeah, it's also on the PS4. I wonder how that would go over online if they were all of a sudden like, yeah, Demon's Souls is now on the PS4, or it's coming to the PS4 here pretty soon. Sony's been kind of back and forth on this whole cross-gen thing. Like, they definitely want to jump to the PS5, but they're being very careful not to leave the PS4 behind too soon. It's a smart business strategy, but Sony hasn't been very upfront with their customers and their fans, so we'll see what happens here with Demon's Souls. It's not guaranteed just because there is a PS4 version kind of floating around in the database, but it is something to keep in mind. Next up, let's talk about a big update that's heading to the Switch, and let's think of all the updates that people are currently looking for. Let's think of folders. Well, it's not that. Maybe custom backgrounds. It's not that either. Messaging your friends? No. What about a new SDK that would allow some big-time ports to head over? You know, I mean, people were thinking like Grand Theft Auto 5, that'd be really cool. Well, not that. What about video streaming or OTT, over-the-top video on demand? Because that is actually something that is happening. We head over here. This was on NexPlayer, where they did the press release. NexPlayer SDK for Nintendo Switch bring video streaming into your Nintendo Switch apps. They said NexPlayer enables live and VOD video streaming inside Nintendo Switch apps and games. NexPlayer for Nintendo Switch allows you to stream live and video on demand videos in Dash and HLS formats to any Nintendo Switch application. It can be very easily integrated into any app, which opens the door for new use cases inside games, such as live video content embedded in the game universe. It also enables OTT providers to offer their live and VOD video services for Netflix users. And I've seen a lot of people ask for Netflix, right? Like there was a whole thing for the past few years. When's Netflix coming to the Switch? Or when's this video streaming service coming to the Switch? I feel like Hulu, of course, YouTube, but that does come up a lot, along with just any other basic updates, as I said, with folders and backgrounds. And it is interesting that some of these video streaming services are not there yet, but having NexPlayer and the SDK at least get brought to the Switch is a step in the right direction. This was an announcement made over the last few days with E3. Obviously at E3, people are thinking more about games, but this does mention being able to bring like video streaming into games, I guess when you're like live in the world itself. So I'll be curious to see if any games use that. I mean, maybe you're walking around in the game and like the TV kicks on in one room and it's like streaming an episode of some series that they have licensing to or something. There's a lot of possibilities there, but I guess it would be good to have more and more of these video streaming services on a system that a lot of people do have access to. Like they say, over 84 million users currently. It's just more stuff that you can add to the Switch, and that's not a bad thing. Next up, let's talk about the Xbox Games Showcase event. It happened yesterday, and it was about 2 hours or so, and it makes sense now watching it back why this was not part of Microsoft's E3 presentation, which was quick and snappy and jumping from game to game. This is a little more drawn out and kind of behind the scenes, but it was there at least for anyone who wanted to take a bit of a deep dive into maybe their favorite game that they saw during that E3 presentation. And what I'm going to do is just kind of go down the list of all of the different games that were covered here. So we'll start from the top with Hellblade 2. That got a behind the scenes trailer. They kind of went over what they are doing currently and mentioning that they were building out a slice of the game itself and then building the rest of the game out from there. We did have another look at Halo Infinite, specifically the multiplayer once again. Forza Horizon 5 was shown further, although we had a pretty good look, I would say, at that during that E3 presentation. The Xbox Design Lab is now back with that new Xbox Series controller. This is a website you can go to and build and customize an Xbox controller however you would like, different colors, and you can even put like text for your gamer tag and all of that on there, which is cool. Battlefield 2042 was shown off a bit further with different game modes attached to All Out Warfare, which includes Classic Conquest and then also Breakthrough. They went a little further with Sea of Thieves, A Pirate's Life, a longer look at Psychonauts 2. They also showed the Anacrusis gameplay. It's a 4-player co-op shooter that changes every time you play it. Stalker 2 had some new details, for example, showing weapon modifications. We had a Plague Tale Innocence getting next-gen version. Those are coming July 6th, which will run up to 4K 60. Age of Empires 4, details for campaign and look at some new factions. Flight Simulator for consoles will include some new tutorials and a Land Anywhere feature, which I guess means that you can just land wherever you want, so that's cool. Hades gameplay and lore had a bit of a breakdown there. Grounded Shroom and Doom had some new details with an update, and they also showed off Shredders, which was that snowboarding game, some gameplay for it, and also kind of went over how it works exactly, with one stick being used for the player and the other stick being used for the board. And then we also had Scarlet Nexus gameplay, but we've kind of already had a demo for that. I'm just ready for that one to release. Overall, it was a pretty good show. It was certainly more for people who were interested in deep dives and behind the scenes, or just wanted more gameplay for something like Psychonauts 2, for example, or Shredders, which Shredders, I guess I'd like another snowboarding game that, according to them, is more of like based around Amped, for example. That's what they mentioned before in an interview. So I am interested in Shredders, and it was good to get a bit more of a breakdown as to how that game works. But what I would do is, if you're interested in any of the games mentioned here, go back and check out some of the different deep dives with developers. It's always fun to see a bit more about the game, of course, ahead of release, and even at times kind of see how it was created. Like with Hellblade 2, I mean, they went down to some of the behind the scenes where they were even putting different landscapes and stuff together. It was pretty interesting to see. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about E3 numbers around these different presentations when it comes to overall viewership, because it was tracked, and we can see here on Twitter, this from Stream Hatchet, saying the top developer conferences of E3 2021 by peak viewer count. So the number one viewer count was Nintendo with 3.1 million. Then we had Xbox at 2.3 million. So, I mean, that makes sense. Two of the big three were there. That's Nintendo and Microsoft. Their showcases that, I mean, had the best ones between them, right? We're going to look back at this E3 and we're mostly just going to remember Nintendo and Microsoft. Then we have Ubisoft at 1.4 million, Square Enix at 1.3 million, and look at this. Devolver Digital at 1.1 million. I'll give this to Devolver. They show up and they try to at least entertain with their presentation, over the top skits, and it's just a lot of fun to just tune in and watch it. That is one of the few shows that you actually check out, not necessarily for the game reveals, just kind of the antics they'll pull throughout and some of the satire that they'll lay all over the gaming industry there. But Nintendo having the number one spot for peak viewer count isn't that surprising. There's a lot of anticipation going into their presentation with the Zelda 35th anniversary. We're going to see Breath of the Wild 2. Are we going to get some of the older Zelda games brought up? Are they going to show Metroid Prime 4, Bayonetta 3? Basically, Nintendo just has a lot of IPs that people are still waiting to find out more about, or or see if they'll get a revival, and we got one of them with Metroid Dread. So that makes sense. Microsoft, I mean, 2.3 million, that's quite a few people to tune in. But yeah, I gotta say the big winner here certainly is Devolver Digital. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, how do you feel about Metroid Dread being a full $60? 43% said I'm buying it day one, the full price doesn't bother me. 30% said I'll wait for reviews first to see if it's worth the money, and then 27% said I'll wait for a sale. $6 is too much for a 2D Metroid. I do think that the smart move, obviously, is to wait for reviews, make sure the game is good, and then buy the game. But I understand if you were a diehard Metroid fan and you were jumping up and down when it said Metroid Dread, you're probably buying the special edition already as it is, and you've probably already pre-ordered it and all of that, sure. But you know what's interesting is the sentiment around the internet when looking at this game is that it's not worth $60. And I was looking around trying to figure that out, and apparently it's because it looks like a 2D, style game, and the visuals aren't up to what we're used to with these big 3D AAA style games. And it kind of reminds me of something Sean Layden said, I think it was last year, where he had mentioned that these games are getting really expensive to make, and we could get to a breaking point, right, where expectations continue to build for a $60 or a $70 game, and there's no room for some of these projects like Metroid Dread, which, by the way, is probably in development for 3-4 years, maybe, with Mercury Steam, who has over 100 employees in partnership with Nintendo EPD. So, like, looking at that, this still cost quite a bit of money, I'm sure, to build. Not like Metroid Prime 4, which is probably going to cost like a fortune. But still, it's interesting that 2D games are viewed as being a $20, $30 game. That's kind of where we are at the indie space of Hollow Knight, for example, that's much cheaper than Metroid Dread. But we'll see when it comes out, the review scores and all of this, and we'll find out if it is worth the $60 when it comes to the content and I guess the length of time, because that's kind of how we view these games now. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Caleb saying, I think Dread will do better because I feel like Metroid has had a long time to gain a decent following and Nintendo Switch Online allowing people to check out Super Metroid. So I'd like to believe that a lot of people are checking out Super Metroid because it's an awesome game, but I do think that Metroid in general has been building a bit in popularity. Sure, Metroid Prime 4 getting that kind of reaction and excitement. I'm sure people who just were not familiar with the franchise at all were like, why are people so excited around Metroid Prime 4? The only problem right now is we don't have Metroid Prime Trilogy. I mean, Nintendo really needs to get that over to the Switch so people can experience those titles. And on the flip side, they need to get Game Boy Advance and Game Boy and all these different games over to the Switch for some of the older Metroid games. I mean, that's the one problem I have right now is on the Switch, if you are curious about the Metroid series, your options are kind of limited right now. You can play Metroid on the NES and Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo, and like, that's kind of it. So I'm hoping that the Metroid Dread, obviously the urban legend that is the Metroid Dread, and the excitement around its reveal and the interest in maybe a 2D Metroid, we'll see, is enough to at least push this over that 3 million sales mark and make it the most successful Metroid game going forward in terms of sales. Give Nintendo some confidence behind the series. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it's Demon's Souls possibly getting ported backwards to the PS4 from the PS5. Let me know what you think about that if it did get announced. And then also, what about this NexPlayer SDK getting moved to the Switch? And what video streaming services would you like to see show up on the system? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.